Okay, the primary chain assembly. So what have we got? This is the original primary chain, which is a duplex chain on a T160 or 2-row, duplex 2-row. And this is the engine sprocket that goes on the crankshaft, and then this is all what's called a shock absorber, shock absorber unit, which has got the chain wheel on the back, and that's a primary chain sort of unit. And inside here are lots of rubber, rubber segments that form the engine shock absorber that take up the strain. Most engines will have this, so it stops any bits snapping with a sudden acceleration or whatever. The rubbers just take up any shocks. They are a shock absorber to stop chain snapping and so on. Okay, now the problem is with a T160 is that this duplex chain is no longer available. It was made specially for the T160 by Reynolds, and they don't make it anymore, and no one does. So it's a problem. There are a few chains knocking about, new old stock ones, etc. But you really need to convert. On my bikes, I've converted to belt drive, because when I did the conversion, that was the only thing that was available. The trouble with a belt drive on a T160 is the belt does sit in oil, because unlike say a Norton Commando, the oil is shared with the primary chain case of the engine, so you can't not have oil in the primary chain case. The belt therefore sits in oil. They don't like sitting in oil, the rubber sort of belts, and they tend to start disintegrating before their time. So the other alternative, which is only just recently become available, which is why I didn't fit it to mine, is a triplex chain conversion, so a 3-row chain, similar to the T150, which takes a triple sprocket on the back of the shock absorber and a triple engine sprocket. Now, you see, when Triumph made the bike, they didn't think, because of the way the gear changes have to be moved over, and there's now half the gear changes in the primary chain case, excuse me, as we'll see later on. There's a big thing called a foot that has to go next to the primary chain case, so in order to make the room, they just fitted a duplex chain. But in fact, dear old Triumph enthusiast in Australia discovered that you can actually squeeze a triple chain in, and these triple chains, this is a T150 chain. I'm pretty sure it is. It's just a standard T150 primary chain, and it does actually fit. So this conversion is made by Triumph enthusiast, they're called. They've got another name as well, but I can't remember it. But they do videos and that on YouTube and so on, and they make bespoke products for the T160s in particular, I think. And so this is their primary chain conversion, dear me, which I bought from Clive Scarf, again, Clive Scarf Systems. He mainly does the stainless steel parts and so on for Tridents, but he also is a supplier of this conversion set from Australia. So we'll be fitting this. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the shock absorber apart, and we keep the central part of the shock absorber, what's called a spider. We'll see that in a minute. Then we put that in the new chain wheel with the new rubbers that I showed you earlier on, and assemble that, and then we'll be ready to start putting the conversion into the primary chain case. One thing to mention now, in case I forget, is that this is actually the inside face of the chain wheel. When you, on a T160, you fit this inwards like that. So this, where my thumb is the outside. On a T150, these nuts, etc., are on the outside. Okay, but on a T160, you face it inside out. Again, I think they did it like that to try and gain a bit of space again for the for that gear change. I can only think that's why they did it. But anyway, that's the way it goes on a T160. The whole thing, this is the outside, and this is the inside. Anyway, we're going to take this apart and then start fitting this into the chain wheel with new rubbers. One thing I think I forgot to mention was, if you were watching the dismantling of the bike, this chain is completely knackered. That's a technical term. Completely gone, and new ones are simply not available. So that's why we have to go for a chain conversion. It's sensible anyway, because even if this was serviceable, at some point in the future we'd have to do a chain conversion, because when it does wear out, it's virtually impossible to replace. Okay, we've got to now just remove this outer cover, front cover. Go. Just taking a couple of rubbers have come out with it. Yeah, and as I thought, I'll see if I can hold this up. The rubbers aren't in great shape, some of them. Yeah, there's sort of nicks taken out of them. There's all odd bits and bits of rubber, particularly there's all little bits of rubber sitting in the case. You know, broken bits of rubber that have obviously broken off the ends of these rubbers, which is why I bought new ones. This one's particularly bad. So they're not destroyed, these, which is good, the rubbers, but they obviously need replacing. You know, look at that, it's all, I think you can see that, can't you? All the edges are rough and have been nibbled away and broken away. So it's not bad, but these obviously definitely needed replacing. So if we're lucky, I shall just now pull the spider out. There it goes. Oh dear. Yeah, okay, and then that frees all the rubbers. This is the old ring gear. It's like the old one of this. Can we see that? Yeah, this is the old one of that. So that's going along with the primary chain. Now I said oh dear, because this is the spider that we're keeping. Now these are pretty unobtainable as well. There's all odd bits of rubber still stuck to it. But as I suspected, this engine having had a hard life, there are two problems that happen with this clutch spider. First of all, these rivets that hold it together come loose. And what someone's done is they've punched all the rivets, and then look, they've run some weld all the way around inside. Okay, look, and they've punched the rivets in order to try. And obviously there's been quite a bit of effort, you know, I think this bike's been used for racing. So they've punched all these rivets in order to try and stop them from coming loose. I think it'll still work. I think it'll still work like that. It's not great, but I think we're okay. The trouble is, I think these are pretty irreplaceable. However, we've got another problem, and that is the actual vanes, the legs, is too wide. The diameter of the spider is too wide to go in the chain wheel. So this chain wheel is obviously very slightly smaller diameter than the old chain wheel. So the first thing I'm going to have to do is to get the grinder out and just very carefully grind the tips off the vane. Okay, after much delicate, just very light grinding down bit by bit with the Dremel of the edges of the vanes, the fingers, then we got it nice, and it's all central. It does in fact have to run central because it runs you know, on this, so I know it's central. Okay, so I'm ready to put the rubbers in. Just a note before I do that is that this is now sort of the outside that faces the outer primary chain case, and this bearing surface, this thrust bearing runs on that, and then in the outer chain case there's another sort of bearing surface there, and that runs on there. Okay, now these two surfaces are known to wear quite badly because, just take my word for it at the moment, well, when you pull the clutch on, it pulls the clutch, but it necessarily pulls the whole thing, and this is then pulled tight against the outer primary chain case, and especially if your clutch is over adjusted, then this is often tight the whole time, and that means that this bearing surface and this one can wear quite badly. There's two ways around this. Number one, you can take this center out and get the whole thing redone with new rivets and so on. It will be particularly difficult in my case because obviously they've all been punched and then the whole thing's been welded. So the alternative to that is, again, Triumph enthusiasts who make this conversion, they also do a sort of a repair kit for this. If this bearing surface here is badly worn, they make a little repair kit, which is basically a thin sort of bearing washer like this one that goes over the top, then the bearing goes on, and then a new one of these outer sort of thrust faces, which is thinner than the original, and that sort of takes up the room of adding one there. Okay, so this is a pretty simple thing to do. Luckily in our case that's not so bad. This isn't so bad. The advantage of the outer one, we'll discuss this a bit later on, is you can reverse it. So whichever is the best side, which I think in our case is this one, is the one you use. But we'll come on to that later. Now this surface obviously is very difficult to repair, and that's why the Triumph Enthusiast repair kit is a good idea if this surface is gone. But it's okay in our case, so we're all right. So I'm just about to start putting the rubbers in. Obviously the first thing to make sure is you have actually got this octopus round the right way, because it's easy, to put this other way up. Don't forget that this side will be the inner side when it goes on the bike, and therefore this nose here is the nose that is going to go in onto these splines and will then go up against that oil seal that we put in, that's the other side of this roller bearing. There's a roller bearing, and the other side of the roller bearing is that oil seal, and so that nose, as it's called, goes in there, and that is what sits on that oil seal, this nose here. So make sure that you haven't got the spider, which is easily done, put the whole thing together upside down. All right, so the long nose sticks up. Okay, yeah, right, so I'm going to start now trying to put the rubbers in. So I'll put the camera on the tripod and we'll have a go at getting these rubbers in, which I've never had a trouble with. So I've never used a special tool to get these rubbers in, so we'll see how we go this time. Because now we've got this different chain wheel in that, I don't know whether it'll work or not. Right, I have actually managed to get the rubbers in using my amazing technique of 2 screwdrivers, and so I'm going to attempt to put the last 2 in on camera. I don't like to do this sort of thing on camera because it always goes wrong, of course, but we'll have a go. So long side towards the outside, and the back towards the spider, so the nose towards the chain wheel. Okay, that's how we have in the manual, and so that's what we're doing. Okay, so I have a special blunt screwdriver here. Can you see these? Can't see the camera from where I am. a special blunt screwdriver because of course I'm leaving these rubbers in, but I don't want to damage them. I've also got a sharp screwdriver for sort of levering things if necessary. Okay, got it the right way round. Get it half in a bit. Is this on camera? I think it is. I'm using my special blunt screwdriver. And then encourage it in. Okay, then I've got my special sharp screwdriver and I'll put that down the back. And help me get that in at the back. Okay. There. Okay. And then the very last one, hopefully, back to the spider, nose to the chain wheel, long side out. But what you don't want to do is, damage the rubber, because if you nick it, then obviously that's a weak point straight away, and so the rubber's going to fail. Oops. Much earlier than it would have done otherwise. But there we go. It seemed like an impossible task to begin with, but they're all in. So what we do now is we put the cover, in a minute when I've cleaned it, we'll put the cover plate back on and then put these put these small bolts back in. These small bolts are special high tensile bolts. I am going to reuse these. Often I would consider changing them, but I think these are okay. I've checked them, because when this is in use, obviously what happens is when there's massive pressure on, these rubbers expand, and they expand sideways. So that puts huge pressure on this cover, which obviously in turn puts massive pressure on these bolts that hold the cover on. So you have to be 100% sure that the bolts are okay. For the main reason really, that if the head decides to snap off in the middle of whilst you're using them, it's okay for the shock absorber, but having a loose bolt head and a chain and a sprocket is not. And there have been several cases of these bolts shearing, and then the bolt head ending up trapped underneath between the chain and the chain wheel, and carnage. I mean, real carnage can happen, because then the chain can snap, that can then lock up the crankshaft, then that can then basically smash the crankcases. In extremis, sometimes you're lucky and this might just drop to the bottom of the chain case and sit there. Other times you're not. But so the best thing is prevention, to make sure that these bolts are 100% okay before you use them. And if you're any uncertain at all, for the reason I just explained, change them. Another enthusiast who's been very helpful, Jeff Mitchell. He's in the past he's managed to find a supply of these, and he's been very helpful. Right, and carrying on from what I said before about making sure these nuts, you don't want the heads coming off. They've got to be torqued down to the correct torque. Too tight, and obviously the danger of shearing the head off. Too loose, and the whole thing's going to start moving, and that will stretch the bolt, and then the head will come off. So this is another tool that Jeff Mitchell put me onto. This is called a torque key, and these are one set torque wrench. So this is set to 3 foot-pounds, which is the torque that is required on these shock absorber nuts. Of course, my shock absorber, there's no way it's going to, I think the lowest setting is like 15 pounds on it, and even then that's not very accurate. So you can buy these off the internet. It's actually 4 Newton meters, is it? Which is, but anyway, it's equivalent to 3 foot-pounds. And so this is great. You put it on, and when it clicks, then you know you're up to torque. There we go. There we go. And that's done. So they're all done up to 3 foot-pounds, which is, so I know that they're exactly as per the manual. And so there's little chance as possible, I'm not saying there's no chance, there's little chance as possible of these heads coming off these and causing a problem. Yeah. So, just yeah, torque key, is it? Yeah, something like that. Yes, or yes, torque key spelt in a weird way. Yeah, but great, works really well. The only thing is you have to have a little, one of these little converters that goes from sort of octagonal to square drive. If you've got one of those, that's fine. Okay, so that's all tightened up, ready to put the locking tabs over.